The twin suns of Varoses burned fiercely in the sky, turning the desert into a furnace. The air shimmered and the ground cracked under the heat. Ethan, a lone human traveler, walked slowly, each step sinking into the orange dust. His water flask was almost empty, and the sandstorm from last night had left him covered in grit. He just wanted to reach the next settlement before sunset. Then he saw it, a trail of dark red spots on the ground. Blood. Fresh. He stopped and crouched, touching the warm, sticky stain with his fingers. It wasn't human blood. The color was too deep, too metallic. His eyes followed the trail, winding between jagged rocks. Every instinct told him to ignore it. On this planet, following blood usually meant finding trouble, or finding something dying. But something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. He followed the trail. The wind carried the faint smell of burned metal and plasma discharge, signs of a fight. As he climbed a rocky ridge, he spotted a figure lying on the sand below. First he thought it was a body. Then the figure moved, slowly lifting its head. It was an alien, a female warrior, tall, strong, with skin the color of polished bronze and dark markings running along her arms. She had long black hair matted with sweat and dust, and her eyes, sharp golden eyes, locked onto him like a predator spotting prey, even lying wounded. She looked dangerous. Her hand clutched a curved blade, its edge still glowing faintly from recent combat. The other hand pressed against her side, where blood soaked through torn armor. When Ethan took a cautious step toward her, she bared her teeth and let out a low growl. "Stay back, human," she hissed, her voice rough but commanding. Ethan raised his hands, showing he had no weapon. "You're bleeding," he said calmly. "If I don't help you, you won't last another hour." Her grip on the blade tightened. "I'd rather die than owe my life to a soft-skinned outsider." The insult rolled off him. He had met enough aliens to know most saw humans as weak. Still, he could see her breathing was shallow, her arm trembling with every move, putting on a show of strength. But the truth was written all over. Hershey was fading fast. "I'm not asking for your trust," Ethan said, stepping closer. "Just let me stop the bleeding. Then you can go back to hating me." Her eyes narrowed, judging him. For a moment, he thought she might lunge forward and strike. Instead, she tried to sit up. But pain ripped through her body, and she collapsed with a sharp gasp. That was all the permission Ethan needed. He rushed forward, kneeling beside her. She immediately tried to shove him away, her strength still surprising. "Despite her injury," said, "save your breath," he cut in, pulling his med kit from his bag. "You'll need it," she snarled, but didn't push him again. Her golden eyes followed his every move as he opened a packet of antiseptic and began cleaning the wound. The injury was bad deep, jagged, probably from a plasma blade. Without quick treatment, she'd be gone before nightfall. When the antiseptic touched her skin, she flinched and let out a low growl. Ethan didn't stop. He had seen worse wounds, on humans and aliens alike. During his years as a drifter and occasional medic for hire. "You're lucky I found you," he muttered. "Lucky?" She scoffed weakly. "Call it cursed. Call it whatever you want," he replied, wrapping a bandage tightly around her side. "Just stay still." She stared at him in silence now, her breathing uneven. The heat was brutal, and Ethan could see the sweat running down her neck. Her blade still rested beside her, but she hadn't tried to lift it again. Maybe because she realized he wasn't her enemy right now. Or maybe because she no longer had the strength. When he finished, he sat back and took a swig from his nearly empty flask. He offered it to her. She hesitated, then snatched it from his hand and drank. The water ran down her chin, and she didn't care. When she was done, she tossed the flask back to him without a word. Ethan met her gaze. "What's your name?" She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, "Carol." "All right, Carol," he said, standing and looking toward the horizon. "You're in no shape to travel alone. There's shelter about an hour from here. You can stay until you're healed." "I don't need," she began, but her voice faltered, and she winced in pain. "You do," he said firmly. "And unless you have a death wish, you'll come with me." She glared at him, as if weighing her pride against her survival. Then, with a low growl of frustration, she pushed herself up with his help. She leaned on him only slightly, but the contact made her tense, like she wasn't used to being close to anyone. They walked slowly, the orange dust swirling around their feet. The sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. Ethan could feel her eyes on him, studying him, maybe trying to figure out why a human would risk helping a wounded enemy. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a bond neither of them had expected. Asterisk. The desert shelter was nothing more than a broken cargo pod half buried in sand, its walls bent and rusted from years of storms. Ethan guided Carl inside, careful not to move her too quickly. The air inside was cooler, but still heavy with dust. She dropped down onto an old supply crate, her hand pressed firmly over the fresh bandage on her side. Her golden eyes stayed, locked on Ethan as if every breath he took was suspicious. "You can rest here," he said, placing his medkit back in his bag. "The wound will reopen if you try to walk again today." Carol's voice was low and sharp. "You shouldn't have touched me in the first place." Ethan glanced at her, unimpressed. "If I hadn't, you'd be dead already." "I would rather die in battle than live because of a human's charity," she snapped, spitting the last word like it was poison. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out a small packet of nutrient paste from his bag and set it beside her. She stared at it like it was a trap. "What is this?" she asked. "Food," he said simply. "You eat it, you get your strength back." "I have strength," she said coldly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Sure you do. That's why you almost collapsed walking here." Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. She picked up the packet, sniffed it cautiously, then tossed it back at him. "I don't eat human rations." He caught it without looking offended. "Fine, starve. I'm not your jailer." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why help me at all?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He sat on the opposite crate, leaning back against the wall, his gaze fixed on the fading light outside the shelter door. "Because leaving you there would have been wrong." Her expression shifted just slightly, but enough for him to notice. "You don't even know me. For all you know, I've killed humans before. I've killed aliens before," he said without emotion. "That doesn't mean I'd watch you bleed out." That answer seemed to unsettle her more than if he had said something sentimental. She was used to warriors who acted only for personal gain or loyalty to their own kind. This human's reasoning didn't fit into any category she knew. Silence filled the small shelter. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose metal panels. Ethan used the noise to focus, taking out his knife to sharpen it against a small whetstone. The steady sound of steel against stone echoed in the space. Carl watched him, her eyes studying his calm face. He didn't seem afraid of her. That alone irritated her. Most humans kept their distance when faced with an armed alien warrior. This one didn't even flinch. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you think saving me will make me your friend?" Ethan smirked faintly without looking up. "No, I think it'll make you alive tomorrow." Her pride bristled. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she owed him nothing. But deep down, a quiet, unwelcome truth crept in. If he had left her in the dust, she wouldn't have survived the night. She stood abruptly, testing her balance. Pain flared through her side, and she had to grab the wall for support. Ethan looked up but didn't move to help. "See, still strong," she said, forcing the words out. "Sure," he replied, going back to sharpening his knife. "Strong. Enough to fall over again if you keep pretending you're fine." Her eyes narrowed, but she sank back onto the crate, frustrated. She hated needing someone, especially a human. But the strange part was, didn't act like she expected. He didn't gloat, didn't demand thanks, didn't treat her like a trophy. And that was more dangerous than any wound. The desert had gone quiet. Outside the shelter, the wind had died, leaving only the soft hiss of sand sliding down the dunes. Inside, a dim light from Ethan's small lantern painted the cargo pod walls in gold and shadow. Carl sat near the far corner, her back to the wall, her blade resting across her knees. Even with a fresh bandage on her side, she kept her weapon close. She didn't trust him, not yet. Ethan sat on the floor near the doorway, checking the readouts on a small, portable scanner. It was an old human model, scratched and dented, but it worked. Every so often, he glanced at her, not in suspicion, but as if making sure she was still breathing. Her voice broke the silence. "You could have left me." "I know," he said, simply, without looking up. "You didn't," she pressed, narrowing her golden eyes. "That means you want something." Ethan finally looked at her, the lamplight catching the calm in his gray eyes. "What makes you think that?" "'Cause no one helps for nothing," she said sharply. "Not on Veros's. Not in war, not ever." Leaned back, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe I'm no one then." Carl's jaw tightened. She wanted to read him like she read her enemy's every twitch, every flicker of expression, but his face was steady, unreadable, that unsettled her more than anger or threats ever could. "You're wasting time," she said, tilting her chin toward the desert. "Your people will be looking for you." "They're not my people," Ethan said. "Not anymore." That made her pause. "Exile?" she guessed. He gave a faint shrug. "Something like that." Her mind was turning now. A human without a side, without ties, could be useful. Still, she didn't like the idea of owing him. She shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. "If I accept your help, you will have my word one favor any time you ask. I repay my debts." Ethan's brow raised. "A bargain?" "Yes," she said firmly. "But once the debt is paid, we are nothing to each other." Weir studied her. For a long moment, the faint hum of the lantern filling the quiet. Finally, he said, "I don't want a bargain, Carl." It caught her off guard. "Then what do you want?" "To see you alive tomorrow," he replied. The answer landed. Heavier than she expected. No manipulation, no hidden demand, just the truth. And for a reason she couldn't explain. It made her more uneasy than any threat would have. She looked away, focusing on the faint patterns of rust on the wall. "You're a strange human, I've been told," he said with a faint smirk. Silence. Settled again, but it wasn't as sharp as before. Carl's eyes drifted toward the lantern's glow, her body finally relaxing enough for exhaustion to slip in. She didn't remember closing her eyes, but when she did, she heard his voice one last time before sleep took her. "Rest. I'll keep watch." And for the first time in years, she let someone else guard her through the night. Morning on Veros's came harsh and sudden. The twin suns rose like molten coins in the sky, burning away the cool of the night within minutes. The desert light spilled into the shelter through a crack in the metal wall. Landing across Carol's face, she stirred, her golden eyes snapping open, then narrowing in confusion. She wasn't used to waking without her hand already gripping her blade. Yet here, her weapon still rested beside her, untouched. Her gaze drifted toward the doorway. Ethan was outside, crouched on the sand, working quietly with his small survival kit. His back was to her, the sunlight turning the edges of his hair almost silver. Every so often, he glanced at the horizon like a man who expected trouble at any moment. Carl pushed herself up slowly, feeling the tight pull of the fresh stitches. She expected pain, but instead there was stability. The wound was sealed. Better than she thought possible for human field medicine. She frowned. When Ethan returned inside, carrying a small flask of water and 2 ration bars, she straightened her posture, trying to hide that she had been watching him. "You're awake." He said, "I didn't sleep," she replied quickly, as if admitting rest was weakness. He didn't challenge her lie.
"Teat."
"I told you I don't eat human rations," she said. Crossing her arms, he simply broke one of the bars in half and tossed the smaller piece to her, then pretend it's alien food. She caught it by reflex, glaring at him but after the moment she took a bite. Her hunger betrayed her, and the sweet, dry taste made her realize how empty her stomach really was. Ethan didn't smirk or gloat. He just sat across from her, eating his share in silence. When she finished, she spoke without meeting his eyes. "You're stitching. It is good." "That's the closest thing to a thank you I've heard from you," he said lightly. "It's not thanks," she said quickly. But the corner of her mouth twitched just barely, but enough that Ethan noticed. They packed up slowly, preparing to move before the suns grew too high. Carol insisted she could walk without help. Ash. Ethan didn't argue, but as soon as she stepped outside, the loose sand shifted under her boots. She stumbled, her knees bending, and for a heartbeat she felt herself falling. A hand caught her arm. Steady, firm, warm. Ethan didn't say anything. He just waited until her balance returned, then let go. She should have pulled away instantly. Instead, she found herself standing there for a second too long, her pulse strange and unfamiliar. They began walking toward the distant canyon where he said shelter was safer. The wind was picking up again, carrying the smell of dry minerals and far-off storms. She noticed for the first time that Ethan always walked slightly ahead, not to lead her, but to take the brunt of the wind. A small thing, human thing. Carol told herself it meant nothing. But somewhere deep inside, a dangerous thought crept in. Maybe this soft-skinned stranger isn't as weak as I believed. The canyon walls rose like the jaws of some ancient beast, blocking most of the burning suns. Ethan led the way, scanning the winding path ahead. The air was cooler here, but shadows hid more than just stone. Carl moved behind him, her steps careful. Her wound ached with every stride, but she kept silent. She hated feeling slow. Hated needing someone to walk ahead of her, clearing the path. Yet her instincts told her this human wasn't leading her into a trap. He was making sure nothing could ambush them. Halfway through the canyon, Ethan stopped so suddenly she almost walked into him. His hand shot up in a silent signal stay. Still, the sound reached her a heartbeat later. Boots on rock, not one set. Many. Carl's golden eyes narrowed. She knew that rhythm-trained steps, moving in formation, her people scouts. If they saw her here, injured and walking with a human, the shame alone would be enough for her own clan to turn against her. "Trouble?" Ethan asked quietly, his hand already resting near the handle of his sidearm. "My hunters," she whispered. "If they find us together, they will kill you and finish what the desert could not do to me." Ethan didn't look scared. "Then we move." But she shook her head. "I can move faster alone. It will slow me down." He gave her a flat. "Look, you can barely stay on your feet." Before she could argue, the voices came, low, sharp, speaking in her native tongue. They were close now, maybe around the next bend. Ethan scanned the canyon wall, spotting a narrow crack between the rocks. "In there," he said, grabbing her arm. Carl resisted for a moment. Hiding was not the way of a warrior, but the heat in her side, and the sound of boots getting closer, forced her pride to bend. They slipped into the crack just as three tall figures emerged from the canyon path, their armor gleaming with the same bronze hue as Carl's. From the shadows, she watched them, her jaw tight. One of the hunters knelt, touching the dust. "Blood trail," he said in their tongue, still fresh. Another sniffed the air, and human scent. Ethan's hand moved toward his weapon, but Carl's hand shot out and pressed against his chest, silent but firm. For a long, tense minute, they stayed hidden as the hunters argued quietly, then moved on down the path. The sound of their boots faded, swallowed by the canyon's echo. Ethan let out a slow breath. Close. Carl stepped out of the shadows, her heart still beating fast. She could have let them find him. She could have told herself he was just another human, another enemy. But instead, she had stopped him from drawing his weapon, stopped him from giving away their position. That was a choice she hadn't planned. You could have fought, she said quietly. I could have died, he replied. And then you'd be bleeding out in the sand again. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but something deep in her chest felt strange, like the weight of old armor shifting. For the first time, she realized the truth. She didn't want him to die. By nightfall, the canyon had opened into a wide cave hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. Ethan pushed the plants aside, checking the inside before stepping in. The cave smelled of damp stone and cool earth, a welcome change from the dry, burning air outside. A small, underground stream trickled along one wall, its soft sound filling the silence. Ethan set down his bag and lit a small fire in a hollowed stone pit. The flames painted the cave in soft gold, chasing away the shadows. Carl lowered herself onto a flat rock near the fire. Her hand still resting lightly on her side, she didn't groan or complain, but Ethan could see the stiffness in her movements. "You should lie down," he said. She gave him a glare that said she wasn't the kind of warrior to lie down while someone else stayed on watch. "I am not weak." "Never said you were," he replied, adjusting the fire. But even the strongest rest before the next fight. Something about the way he said it, calm without mockery, made her pause. Slowly she lay back, propping herself on one elbow so she could still see him. The fire crackled between them. Ethan took out a small metal pot, filling it from the stream. He added a few dried leaves from his pack. Soon, the scent of something warm and herbal filled the air. Carol sniffed. "What is that?" "Tea," he said. "Helps with pain." "I don't drink human drinks." He smiled faintly. "It's fine. It's just hot water then." She narrowed her eyes at him, but accepted the small cup when he offered it. The heat seeped into her fingers, and without meaning to, she took a sip. It wasn't unpleasant. In fact, it eased some of the tightness in her chest. Ethan didn't speak much after that. He simply sat near the fire, carving something into a small piece of wood. The soft sound of his knife on the grain mixed with the stream's trickle, creating a quiet rhythm that made the cave feel safe. Carl found herself watching him. His movements were steady, his posture relaxed. She realized she hadn't felt this calm around another living being in years, without thinking. She shifted closer to the fire and closer to him. The warmth, both from the flames and his presence, was strange, but not unwelcome. He glanced at her, but said nothing, only passing her a second cup of tea. This time, she didn't refuse. For a long moment, the fierce alien warrior who once hissed at him, who once threatened to gut him in the desert, simply sat there in silence, sipping tea like a tired traveler, and in the quiet flicker of firelight, Carl's golden eyes softened. Just a little. She didn't notice it, but Ethan did. And he didn't smile, didn't comment, didn't ruin the moment. He just let her be. The next morning came with the quiet hum of the desert wind outside the cave. Ethan woke early, gathering his gear. Carl was still resting, her breathing steady, her blade within reach, as always. But for once she didn't wake at the sound of his movements. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw him checking the edges of the bandage. "You heal fast," he said. "You'll be walking without pain soon." She sat up slowly, her expression unreadable. "And our paths will part." Ethan didn't answer right away, simply adjusted his pack and moved toward the cave entrance. "If that's what you want?" Something about the way he said it, calm, without trying to stop her, hit her harder than she expected. She thought she would feel relief. Instead, there was an ache deep in her chest. One she didn't know how to name. They walked together through the canyon one last time. The sunlight filtering down in thin golden beams. Neither spoke much. The silence wasn't tense anymore. It was heavy with things unsaid. At the edge of the desert, where their paths would split, Carl stopped. She turned to face him, the fierce warrior mask back on her face, but not as strong as before. "You should know," she said slowly. "My people would never believe this story. A human saving a warrior of Varos's? They would call it weakness." "And what do you call it?" Ethan asked. Her golden eyes met his. "Something I never thought I'd owe anyone." She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly against his chest, a gesture that, in her culture, was given only to those worthy of trust. "You have my life. If you call for me, I will come, no matter where you are." Ethan gave a small nod. "Ah!" "And if I don't call?" Her lips curved into the faintest, almost shy smile. "Then I will still find you." Without another word, she turned and walked into the desert. Ethan watched her until the shimmer of heat swallowed her figure. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the last time he'd see Carl, because the fierce alien girl who once threatened to kill him had left as something else entirely, and somewhere, under those golden eyes and warrior pride, a gentle kitten was waiting to come back.